Welcome to Energy Vista, a podcast on energy issues, personal and professional trajectories. I'm your host, Leslie Palti-Guzman. And Happy New Year to all of you, and may 2021 be the year of optimism, civism, and high quality education. So, in each episode of the podcast, we chat with energy experts from all around the world. We exchange on timely energy issues as well on their life experience. You will learn a lot, whether you are an energy aficionado or a newbie. It's January 8, 2021, and time for a new Energy Vista episode. Today I'm exchanging with Aura Sabadus, a senior energy journalist with ICIS, specializing in energy markets in Eastern and Southern Europe, Turkey, Ukraine, Romania, and the Caspian region. Aura holds a PhD in international relations. She's originally from Romania, but has been living many years in London and is still there through COVID and through Brexit. And we'll come back to her personal trajectory a little in the second part of the podcast. Hi, Aura.
Hi, Leslie. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you for joining us and Happy New Year. So it seems that for European energy security, the year is starting well. The TAP pipeline has been officially inaugurated. So it's the last part of the Southern Gas Corridor, which brings a new route and a new supply to Europe from Azerbaijan. Can you tell us a little bit more why it's a milestone for European energy security?
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. We have seen the first molecules of Caspian gas reaching southern Europe. That means Greece and further to Italy. And of course, let's not forget that the Southern Gas Corridor, which is made up of the Trans-Anatolian pipeline, the pipeline that crosses Turkey, and the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, the pipeline which effectively links up with TANAP, the Trans-Anatolian pipeline, and takes the gas to Italy, is a project that has been heavily supported by the European Union. Now, the importance of this gas lies not so much in the fact that we swap one molecule, i.e. the Caspian molecule, for Russian molecule, which has obviously dominated Eastern Europe and the Balkans, but mainly in the fact that we see now gas that is sold at more flexible terms than we were used to before. Before, we know that this region has been buying Russian gas at oil indexed prices with some heavy take-or-pay and with destination clauses. Of course, the times are long gone since we've seen those. But in Italy, the prices are now, as far as we understand, indexed to the Italian hub, so to the PSV. And as far as we understand for Greece, there is an element of indexation to the Austrian hub VTP. Later in the year, we're going to see 1 billion cubic meters of gas reaching Bulgaria from Greece via the interconnector Greece-Bulgaria, which is also supposed to come online. So really very exciting for this region at this time. And of course, gas has also started to arrive in Turkey, but much earlier than what we see coming in now via TAP. Turkey first started to take gas from the second phase of the Shah Deniz project in Azerbaijan in June 2018. And has been taking quite a lot of Azeri gas in recent years.
Very, very interesting. I'm just wondering if, is it coming too late in a way? Like, we remember that, at the time when the Nabucco pipeline was discussed, there was a lot of excitement and hopes that European energy security would diversify away from Russian gas. But I feel that with the Southern Gas Corridor, which is kind of a replacement of what Nabucco was supposed to be in a way, with different routes and different countries. The idea is that right now in Europe, and at least in the establishment, all eyes are on decarbonization and building the hydrogen economy. And I feel it was not that much celebrated this week, the opening of the pipeline.
You're absolutely right to point this out, and the fact that Europe is moving now in a different direction, a direction that will gradually move towards a less polluting forms of generation means that gas may not be such an important fuel going forward in the long term. But at least for the short term, I suppose that it's still going to be important. And let's not forget that right now, just as we speak, prices of gas are soaring.
Jumping to the roof, yes.
Exactly. So I suppose the Italians may be celebrating the fact that there is more gas coming to the market right now. Of course, going forward, we have to really consider whether it is necessary to look at the second phase or an expanded southern gas corridor, as had been discussed before. But certainly for now, I believe that it is important to have this alternative gas. And for Eastern Europe, and in particular for countries like Greece and Bulgaria, which had been heavily dependent on coal generation, I was calculating, just as an aside, I was calculating that these countries were depending about 40% of their electricity generation on lignite or imported coal. So going forward, I don't see gas being very quickly replaced.
Yeah.
Yes, the region will eventually move towards cleaner forms of generation. But for now, I believe that gas will indeed remain the transition fuel, and countries like Greece, Bulgaria will be looking to build more gas-fired capacity.
Yeah, so that's another takeaway also with the startup of the pipeline is that it seems that the northwest southeast European divide is widening even more on its attitude towards gas imports. Like I feel that Eastern and Southern Europe will continue to prioritize diversification and enhance security of supply that gas and LNG brings for environmental concerns, like you mentioned, like coal to gas switching, and also obviously security issues.
For sure, we see now Western European countries actively promoting new forms of new fuels like hydrogen. We see a new scramble for hydrogen, and most of this hydrogen apparently will be electrolyzed hydrogen, so hydrogen coming um, from water basically, and renewable forms of generation rather than hydrogen coming based on steam methane reformation, which is gas. But eventually these Eastern European countries probably will have to catch up with the rest of Europe. But yes, you are absolutely right to point to the fact that there may be a mismatch or a two-speed Europe in terms of different forms of generation, with Western Europe moving faster towards cleaner types of generation and Eastern Europe still catching up. So yes, that difference that we saw played out in the previous decade, where Western Europe was better connected, had more infrastructure, access to more sources of supplies, whereas Eastern Europe was heavily dependent on Russia, is now being played out at a different level. So yes, you're right in that respect.
So do you feel there is a kind of Western European complacency regarding European gas market integration? Like I feel, the European Commission is saying mission accomplished. We have succeeded in making an interconnected, integrated European gas market, and now let's go on to the next phase of our market, looking at the hydrogen economy and kind of putting on the side some maybe unfinished business regarding interconnectors. We know that the European Commission will no longer finance those interconnectors. Some of them have been built, and indeed we can celebrate huge progress on this record. The market is, yes, much better integrated, but do you feel there are still some countries that have been left out?
Well, you use the word complacency. I would not use that word per se, but I would say that maybe in a way the Commission is resigned to the fact that Eastern Europe has intrinsic problems. And when I say intrinsic problems, I refer to social problems. So, when you have countries that depend on coal generation, you're also bound to have social problems because lots of this coal comes from mining, right? And you have a big segment of the population that is employed by this sector. So it's not that easy to switch from one form of generation to the other without thinking of all these collateral issues. Furthermore, last year we saw that gas prices were much cheaper than other forms of generation. So looking forward to comparing gas prices with hydrogen, um, that gas prices were certainly cheaper than what hydrogen prices seem to be in the future. Again, things have changed very rapidly, and we now see very high gas prices, very bullish high prices. So again, we can't make that comparison. But certainly going forward, these countries, Eastern European countries, which have been poorer than, and that's a reality, much poorer than Western Europe, will have to take into consideration these economic factors, as well as the social factors that I've just mentioned. So I would say that rather than complacency, there is more an element of a resignation. So Europe Commission is more resigned to the fact that this is the reality, but it has also made it very clear that it will stop financing gas projects.
So what about, I had a list which might be completely obsolete, but of interconnectors that will remain to be built to ensure like free flow of regasified LNG between the countries. So can you tell, like the Hungary-Slovenia interconnector, is it going anywhere?
Well, last time I looked, I believe that it was supposed to go forward, yes, and to be completed. I have not seen anything more recent, so recent than maybe a year.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to give you a very recent update on that. But last time I looked, it was supposed to be going forward. And yes, I believe that Hungary is actually looking at even establishing itself as a regional hub.
Yeah, with the startup of the Croatian
Exactly.
LNG regasification. Yeah.
Exactly.
What about the Lithuania-Poland interconnector?
Again, I would not be able to give you an update on that interconnector. I'm afraid.
And Slovakia, Poland?
Well, I suppose again it's an older an older project, but nothing very recent. Certainly not. I haven't seen personally. I mean, it may be that there have been some more updates, but I have not seen anything, a response from these two countries regarding the European Commission decision not to build or not to finance these projects.
So is it fair to assume that maybe some of those interconnectors will never get built if they don't get the EU money, or actually other players will step in to finance those?
Maybe we might see more private money coming in. But what I find rather extraordinary and quite surprising is that in the past, there has been some money paid by EBRD, by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, to build pipelines, so interconnectors. I'm talking here, for example, the Romania-Bulgaria interconnector or the Romania-Moldova interconnector, which have been built for a long time, but heavily underused. So it makes you wonder, I mean, at the end of the day, maybe the European Commission is right to say that we're not going to underwrite any of these projects if they're not going to be used. I mean, for example, with Romania and Moldova, there has been very, very little gas going through. Romania say that it had built, now it has completed a section of pipeline that links the interconnector to the capital, Chisinau. But I'm yet to see the results, because if the Russians are going to sell gas much cheaper to Moldova, which they did, I mean, being the dominant supplier, I don't see how Romania can compete selling gas via a new interconnector where transmission fees are going to be much higher, right?
Very interesting. And how can we make sure that the Azerbaijani gas is not flowing just through the Eastern Europe, but also to the north of Europe?
That's a very good question. Indeed, not just Azeri gas, but also LNG.
Right.
Let's not forget that Greece and Turkey have been heavily importing gas, LNG rather, from the global. They've been active buyers in the global market last year. But not much has been reaching the region simply because even though there is this infrastructure in place, so we have the Southern Gas Corridor, we have interconnectors, there is the Trans-Balkan pipeline, so the historical corridor, the historic corridor that had been used for the export of Russian gas to the Balkans and Turkey. There are still no interconnection agreements signed, and
Mm-hmm.
I would like to point out the fact that Romania, for example, has been losing out a lot of transit money because of the diversion of Russian flows from the Trans-Balkan line to Turk Stream, and yet it has not made any efforts to sign interconnection agreements with Ukraine, for example, for other points. I mean, there are 5 interconnection points between Ukraine and Romania. And yet, out of these 5, there is only one that is covered by an interconnection agreement. The pipeline has almost 30 BCM capacity.
Mm.
So, the infrastructure is there. The gas is there, so the new sources of gas, but there is no political will. So that's the challenge that we face right now.
Under the Trump administration, there has been a lot of discussions and dialogues directly between the US and Eastern Europe, including with the 3C initiative, which was a project to facilitate interconnectivity on energy, infrastructure, and digitalization of projects. What do you expect under the Biden administration?
I think that trend will continue. I think the US is taking an increasing interest in the region. Just to give you a few examples, so I listened to a podcast in December, and Kinzinger was invited, and he said even though Turk Stream is no longer subject to US sanctions, because obviously most of it had been completed, so whatever sanctions had been taken as part of the NDAA will not apply to Turk Stream. The US will take a very keen interest in the Balkans, and will make sure that it will build a presence in that part of the world, which I thought was really interesting. Also, the US is now involved in helping to build 2 new reactors, nuclear reactors at the Romanian nuclear power plant. In the past, Romania had been in talks with the Chinese, but the talks collapsed, and now the US stepped in, and it's even supposed to finance these 2 reactors. And as I said, we've seen a lot of US LNG coming to the region, again, with prices moving in a different direction. And in fact, today I even heard of a half cargo being sold to Japan at above $30 per MMBtu,
Right.
which, if correct, is incredible. If there is more LNG coming to the region, then definitely we're going to see a higher US interest in these 2 countries, and maybe even in more inland. So Romania, Ukraine, and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Turkey was one of the largest importer of US LNG in 2020.
Of course it was, because just before we started our conversation, I was looking at the prices. So in 2020, Turkey would have bought LNG at $383 per MMBTU around this time of year last year. Whereas the Russian oil index pipeline gas was around $720 per MMBTU. Now it's the complete reverse. So the Russian contract for Q1 is about $4.70, whereas the LNG price for February, assessed by my company ICIS, is around 720. So it will be very interesting to see whether Turkey is going to buy more LNG this year, considering these prices.
And considering also that there will be less pressure from the Trump administration, also.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, and I think your listeners may be interested in this, Turkey will be negotiating about 16 billion cubic meters of gas held in long-term contracts by Turkey with Russia, Azerbaijan, and Nigeria expired this year. So these are all up for renewal. So we'll have to see whether Turkey will be looking to renew and under what terms. And if not, then how is it going to secure this gas?
Very interesting. And you mentioned China quickly. We hear a lot about influence of Russia in Central and Eastern Europe. What about China? Is it mostly in infrastructure? And you mentioned the nuclear reactors.
Yes, there were some. As I said, Romania had been in talks with the Chinese until last year or 2 years ago, I believe, for the construction of these two reactors. Now talks have collapsed, and the US stepped in, and of course there is interest from Chinese companies. I mean, there is a classic example that is constantly quoted about the port, the Greek port of Piraeus, which had been bought by the Chinese, and of course they would be interested in infrastructure, but I believe that until now, or I can't say that it's a heavy presence, a heavy Chinese presence in the Eastern European energy infrastructure.
Great. So, Aura, let's move to your personal trajectory.
Sure.
So you are an energy journalist. Can you tell us how did you become an energy journalist? You hold a PhD in international affairs and philosophy. Mm-hmm. And what do you like the most about being an energy reporter?
Well, firstly, how I ended up becoming an energy journalist. I had worked as a journalist for newspapers before, so I was a general reporter. But I became increasingly interested in energy simply because I come from a part of the world that is, or had
Romania, I remind.
Exactly, Romania. Yes, I'm Romanian, and where energy and politics have intersect quite a lot, or had been, at least up until now. And I was always interested in this relation between politics and markets, not necessarily just in energy, but in general, how one impacts the other. But I think in as far as energy is concerned, this is even more visible. And of course, my biggest point of interest was how markets liberalize and whether politics can be a driver of liberalization, or in fact it's an obstacle. And this is how this became a very, very big area of interest for me, and I decided to do a PhD looking exactly at this topic, and I focused on the liberalization of the Turkish gas market, which I thought was a very interesting subject because it was something that I'd been following for many, many years. And I found it fascinating to see how different political interests, domestic interests, but also international interests, were either driving or obstructing this market opening.
Yeah.
So I thought it was it's something that for me at least is a constant source of area of interest for me as far as energy is concerned. Is that interplay between politics and markets.
Yeah, that's something that also I find fascinating, geopolitics and energy too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so you've been doing this for more than a decade. What keeps you, still excited about your job?
It's a very good question. I think the fact that I learn something new every day, even though I've been in this field, I've been working for 11 years, more than 11 years. I think that it's a constant source of amazement and a constant source of a novelty. And just take this recent example. Up until last year, everybody was worried about negative prices, gas prices, right? And now we see record prices, LNG prices, within the space of less than a year.
Yeah.
So absolutely fascinating how markets move and how incredibly versatile they are, and ultimately our markets are people, right? So that's very much sentiment also plays out in all this. So it's a fascination. It's a constant source of fascination, I would say.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I keep learning every day also.
There you go.
You're covering a sensitive area in terms of geopolitics. And I was wondering, have you ever felt pressured or threatened or influenced in your reporting?
No, I'm very lucky that I work for a company that appreciates freedom of speech, encourages it, and I'm very grateful that my company not only allows me to write, obviously according to ethical principles or based on ethical principles, but also encourages freedom of speech. I hear of some of my colleagues in this region who may not have the same freedom that I do, and I'm very sorry for them. But on the other hand, I'm exceedingly grateful to be able to work for this company and to have this freedom to express myself and to bring the information that this region needs.
And that's great to hear. And we are also very grateful that for your excellent reporting and objective reporting and high quality reporting.
Thank you. It's good to hear that.
So thank you so much, Aura, for joining us.
My pleasure, Leslie.
And good luck, because we hear, not so great news from the UK right now with another variant of COVID-19. So stay healthy.
Thank you very much. That's an invisible enemy, but let's hope everything will be fine, and we'll get over it very soon, all of us. And all the best to you as well, Leslie.
Thank you. Cheers to that. Bye-bye, Aura.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
That concludes our Energy Vista podcast, which was recorded on January 8, 2021. This is Leslie Palti-Guzman saying good day and good luck.